Hello gamers, my name is Duma and welcome to the Game Room. If you're new to the channel, one of the things we provide are modified or adaptive builds for those gamers who just need a little help. Maybe you're moving a bit slower for whatever reason, lost a bit of hand dexterity, some of my veterans with TBI out there, or even if you just like and enjoy a super simple way to play, which I totally get. We have 2 button builds, 3 button builds, and in some of the previous patches, highly adaptive with just 1 button builds and so on. These aren't just Mickey Mouse builds either. These are thoroughly playtested and min-maxed so that you can not only participate in simple modified way with your peers and friends, but do well, and in some areas do very well. Let me show you all the playtesting I did and show some receipts of what the build is capable of. This is a 2-button sorcerer build using no pets, and it's not a heavy attack build, so you're mainly pressing 1 damage button spammable the majority of the time. Veteran arenas were too easy. Many of the mechanics I wanted to test for those gamers who may be moving very slowly and just flat-footed stood and mini mechanics and out-healed most things within reason. The number 1 damage check in ESO for solo content that is intended to be soloed are the tether adds on the final boss of Veteran Vateshran, and it chopped through every single spawn of them with ease. With 1 ability swap, still keeping 2 buttons, you can take this into Veteran dungeons as well with a solid AoE kit for trash and solid single target for bosses. You can even take this to Infinite Archive for early Arc chest and gear farming and whatnot. The Arc 2 Marauder was too easy, and the Arc 3 Marauder was also not a problem. Once you hit Arc 4, I would just reset. This is a perfect kit for Arc 1 through the end of 3, which is as far as you really want to go when gear farming anyway, and it starts to take much longer to clear stages starting in Arc 4. Anything can work to clear early arcs, but this also gives very strong heals that are all happening passively that you don't really have to dedicate any thought to it. Designed for that accommodation aspect of the build. Now for the big one on the channel, the Immortal tag is given to builds that can solo clear this trial boss, St. Lothus, and the 12-man trial Asylum Sanctorium in about 10 minutes without any big survivability or sustain issues. This one cleared it right around 7 minutes, which I do believe is the fastest one of them all now somehow, or right up there with it. Even the ones with a full bar of abilities. Pretty wild, honestly, and I didn't expect it at all. A great side benefit to this build is, let's say you can move pretty quick with a few buttons and wanted to work on parsing a little bit. This is a perfect kit to 2-button parse and get the flow and feeling of it down. With a few tweaks to the build, it's capable of putting out around 73 to 74 DPS, which is very good all things considered with the gear we're using, and mostly 1 button. Also, I totally get how adaptive builds and parsing is a bit oil and water, and by no means am I saying you're guaranteed to hit 74 DPS. That was a very high level of parsing, but there is a sliding scale of individual ability in there for everyone, and I'm just simply demonstrating where the ceiling is to give you something to work towards if you're both interested and capable. Also, this is the same 2 buttons in the dungeon setup, so you can translate your parsing practice from the dummy straight into content. I want to make it clear though, this is primarily intended to be a solo build. That's the core of it. The parsing and group aspect is a bit of a bonus. I'll still go over that for you briefly in the video, however. I have some gameplay for you as well at the end of the video, and I'm going to go over this one quick, but the written guide is up and available for you over at thegameroom.tv. Let's get it. For this build, a Magicka based race is ideal, with High Elf being the best and also what all the numbers you previously saw were based around. However, the build can still work with any race in the game, even if you are a stamina based race. You'll lose a bit of stats, but you'll be fine. It won't break anything. We put all 64 points into Magicka, and we use the Lover Mundus for solo content and the Thief for parsing and group content, with either Clockwork Citrus Fillet or Witch Mother's Potent Brew food coupled with Tripots for consumables. You can also use Ghastly Eyeballs food for maximum damage. For gear, first we're using the Infinite Archive set, Beacon of Oblivion. It's got great 2, 3, and 4 set bonuses for solo content, but we're mainly concerned about the second part of the 5 set, which says when we do not have a pet active, it increases both our damage and healing done by 15%, which is a lot of percent increase. Since we'll be heavily using the Reaving Blow CP, which I'll go over in just a moment, this is kind of double dipping with healing by increasing the damage we do, which increases our healing received from Reaving Blows, and also giving our other heals an increase as well. We pair that with the Overwhelming Surge set, which shoots lightning damage from your body and restores Magicka based off a portion of the damage it does. So you get nice stats from the 2, 3, and 4 set bonuses, and then a 5 set that provides both AoE damage and sustain, which is important for the build because we'll be using mostly medium armor for the extra spell damage from the medium armor passives, and lacking the Magicka sustain from the light armor passives, while also benefiting with more armor from medium armor, as we'll be in melee range face-taking things most of the time. It all works in synergy together for a well-rounded solo kit. You want a mix of medium and light, with trying to make sure light is on the minor pieces. You can also run heavy chest if you prefer to take advantage of the Undaunted passives, and with with a bit more armor as well if needed. It's okay if this isn't perfect. Beacon drops in all 3 weights, so the farm can be a bit grindy. Just do the best that you can. What you see here is the config that I ran with. I just tried to make it simple visually. There's other ways you can chop it up in the same area of resistances. I wouldn't sweat it too much, just get it close. We get a bit of penetration and crit from the light armor pieces that's valuable, so there's some room to slide things around between resistances and armor weight passives. We top this off with a monster helm of choice that has a line of penetration like Krog's, Oakensoul, and a precise lightning staff with the flame enchant. All divine traits on armor with max Magicka enchants, with either infused or arcane on the jewelry with increased magical harm enchants. CP is here for you as well. We'll be coming back to Reaving Blows and Strategic Resolve here in just a moment as well when we talk about healing. For our abilities and all versions of the build, we're going to have 3 passive abilities we don't press, a spammable, a longer lasting ability we change out depending on content, and an ultimate we mostly don't use. Our first passive ability is Bound Aegis. This gives us 8% more Magicka, giving us more damage and healing, as well as the buff Minor Resolve, making us more tanky, which is often needed. Next, we have the Mage's Guild ability, Inner Light, for the 5% more Magicka from the ability, and 2% more Magicka and Magic Sustain from the Mage's Guild passive Magicka Controller. Next is the Fighter's Guild ability, Ring of Preservation. This increases your spell damage by 3% from the Fighter's Guild passive Slayer. It will also double as another ability for you for yet another heal, an AO heal for your group, should you ever want that, but it's not ever used in the build, just an extra benefit of having it slotted. Next is the Sorcerer ability Critical Surge, which heals once every second when doing critical damage, which will equate to a ton of passive healing for you. If you find you don't need this extra healing, and or when you're doing group content like dungeons, you swap this out for Lightning Flood for solid AoE damage and a burst synergy for the group. In the trial boss solo, I used Razor Caltrops, but that was for a very isolated case. However, if you find your group may need more penetration, this can be a good option as well for its AoE major breach it provides. In Infinite Archive, once you get a focused efforts, you can use Elemental Susceptibility here as well to spread solid burning damage around if you like. For our ultimate, we're going to slot the Summon Charged Atronach. However, we will be using the Strategic Reserve slottable, which gives us a ton of health recovery per ultimate we have stored. So while at max ultimate of 500 with Clockwork Citrus Fillet food, and very important, keep your tripods rolling for the major endurance buff for 30% more health recovery, we get a passive 3803 health recovery, which turns our health recovery from a mostly negligible stat to a very notable source of permanent passive healing. A Fighter's Guild ultimate would give us a tiny bit more damage from the passive Slayer, giving us a 1% increase over a Sorcerer skill slotted here. But the reason we're using Atro is moments when you don't need all that health recovery, boom, you have a great and useful ultimate ready for you. So to me, the benefit of actually having the ultimate to use, if wanted, is worth losing 1% damage for a much more viable ability slotted. And then if you use it, you just build back up your ultimate and then bam, you're back at full health recovery. So a big double benefit if you wanted the extra button press. Our main ability is Crystal Fragments, known as Frags. There is a ton packed into this skill connected to the build. It's pretty cool. First, it's an amazing spammable, dealing great damage, and often procs a proc for a much increased version of the ability at half the cost. So between the main component and its proc, it's a big damage ability. Every use of it also procs the Blood Magic passive, healing you, so a heal mostly every second essentially. Gets us access to the Exploitation passive for the rare crit buff of Minor Prophecy. The Overwhelming Surge set requires a class ability to proc, which Frags checks that box off as well for us. And it's a direct damage source, so it's activating the Reaving Blow CP, giving us a second source of healing when it's used. So a lot's happening when we're spamming Frags here. Now let's check out all the healing of the ability in total. Reaving Blows heals us for 9% of the direct damage we do. Your light attacks are direct damage, receiving a heal, as you can see here. Frags is direct damage, receiving a heal from Reaving Blows, and also the Sorcerer Blood Magic passive at the same time. Putting those two together while you light weave the ability, you now have 3 sources of healing per second. Now we activate Crit Surge for another source of healing per second, and we have a high enough crit rating with the build to proc crits somewhat mostly every second. And as you can see here, we have a bananas amount of healing popping off, and that's just light weaving one ability. Even if you aren't great at weaving and randomly kind of pop some off here and there, that's totally cool. It's still overloaded in heals. Let's say you want even more heals than that and another button, boom, you got one on the bars right here with Ring of Preservation. Even without preservation, this is mostly fully immortal outside of death mechanics, escalating damage, and one-shots. So the moral of that story is, as long as you're pressing your few buttons, you're good, but you gotta press the buttons. Don't back off when you're in trouble, go harder. More presses, more heals. No button presses, no heals. You spam the button with some light attacks and the build will take care of the rest. Your Overwhelming Surge set only has a distance of 8 meters. fighters, so you need to be close to melee range to receive its benefits. So the playstyle is super simple. Stand near melee range, out of fires, and spam frags with light attacks as much as you're able, and keep crit surge rolling. You can also kite backwards a bit to mitigate a bit of melee hits over time from enemies if you like as well. You can also play at ranged for short periods of time when it makes sense, such as the pinwheel mechanic on the final red boss in Vateshran. That's totally fine. Just get back up in there closer when you're able to. For dungeon content, or if you feel you don't need the crit surge heals, you just drop lightning flood on enemies and do your thing with frags. It's great area damage while bursting down individual mobs. It's also the same ability for parsing. If you wanted to go full DPS, we make a few handful of changes to the build. We replace Aegis for any other Fighter's Guild ability for another stack of the passive Slayer. We will be using our ultimate, so we swap Strategic Reserve for siphoning spells, or Celerity if you don't need the sustain, and we drop Reaving Blows for Backstabber. However, in dungeons, you may want to keep Reaving Blows for more survivability and a bit less damage, but that's up to you. Then we use a medium Slime Crawl Helm with Bloodthirsty jewelry traits, although I only recommend Bloodthirsty if you wanted to focus on pure damage, because you'll lose the healing benefit of the spell damage if you decided to slot a heal, as Bloodthirsty only applies to damage. And that said, as it does continue to increase your frags damage as the target's health gets lower, that increases your healing received from the Reaving Blow CP. So you do get this little backdoor increase in healing in a weird way that's worth noting. And you couldn't have asked for a simple rotation of Lightning Flood followed by 9 frags and repeat. Or if you don't want to count, just drop Flood, spam frags, and drop Flood again right when it's going to expire. To open a parse properly, open with ulti first, followed by the Flood and 9 frag rotation, using ultimate as it comes available there forward. If you did this close to perfectly with light weaving, you would have a ceiling of around 73, maybe 75k with some crit RNG as a goal if you wanted to know for your maximum. That will also give you a good general idea of where you are in the parsing spectrum of your mastery of light weaving, because it's an ultra simple rotation, so it's a straight road. Everybody's going down the same straight line. There's no bends and turns and weird signs to follow. There's no back bar swapping, procs to actually manage, nothing dynamic. It's easy to evaluate, and I would say this is a great one to test yourself if you're trying to learn it or improve it to see where you are. And that's it, gamers. That's all I got. I hope you enjoy it. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments and I'll see if I can help you out. I genuinely appreciate you watching. Thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful day.